He's got the.
Just call him out.
No. He says he has to leave.
Oh, yes, okay.
I guess we have
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this is on. My name is Neeli Bendapudi, and it's my great privilege to serve as the Dean of the best business school out there, the University of Kansas Business School. It is such joy for me today to welcome you all, because I'm not just the Dean, I'm an alumna of this institution. And today was made possible by one of our distinguished alumni, somebody that we've all grown to know and absolutely adore, David Booth. So David, if you would just wave. Okay, that's how strongly we all applauded. That's a good thing. And David, thank you for making today possible. David Booth introduced me to our speaker for today, and how fortunate are we to have Nobel laureate Bob-Merton here. So please join me in a big round of applause. This lecture is part of the university's, the chancellor's vision and the provost's vision of bold aspirations. So we are really delighted that Bob-Merton is here. Usually I would go on and on with introductions of both gentlemen, but you've seen the bios. The fact that you're here and we have standing room only tells me you know who they are. So I'm going to make sure we give every moment we can to the presenters. So please join me in welcoming Bob-Merton. I've asked Bob to make about 35 minutes of comments, and then we will turn to David Booth to talk about how they're using the science of finance, how this collaboration between two intellectual giants, how they've bridged theory and practice. And then we will open it up to questions and answers. And students, especially you, you're the reason they're here, so please don't hesitate. Start thinking up those questions right now. And yes, you may ask what it was like to win the Nobel Prize. So with that, Bob-Merton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand while I do this, then I'll sit down with David, just because I'm so used to talking standing up. You know, you're professors, so I feel constrained sitting in the chair. And then I can see all of you back there, at least, sort of. But anyway, I thank you very much for coming and for inviting me. It's a great treat to be here. This is my first time in Lawrence, and I'm enjoying it immensely. So let's get to business. Let me tell you what I had in mind for the lecture and what the objectives were, or are. And first, I wanted to pick a topic which is topical, that might interest a broad audience. As you can see, I say happily, you all have my handouts. This is how I teach my class. I actually bring my students for every single class handouts, not things to be read later, but just so I don't have to write things down and you don't have to write things down, so we can have a conversation. So this feels very comfortable to me, and if you're in the way back, I assume you can see them as well as in the front. So what I wanted to talk about was a topical issue, this issue of addressing a global problem, which is how do you go about addressing the retirement funding problem. And I'll come back as to motivate a little bit and then get through it. But that's the substantive topic. So that's the first point of the lecture. The second one is the subtitle. It's a case study in how you go about doing sort of financial engineering, an engineering solution to come up with a solution to the problem. And so I want to take you through how the thinking and development does, so you have a sense of the process of how you solve the problem. And this, I hope, will be universal whether or not you're interested in retirement and whether or not you're an engineer. You just see how it's done, and the students can see. And then what I want to do is to show you that how important for those who are in finance or from the business school, how important it is that we bring to bear the things that you're taught and learned there, the finance science, in order to address these big global problems. I picked one, but there are many where it can contribute to it. And finally, we're going to then have a discussion about how you actually implement the solution. And I've used it so many times, and you probably all know it, but I think it was Edison that said, you know, when it comes to things, it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration in getting actually to a solution implemented. And there's a lot of inspiration from David as well and from Dimensional, but they are indeed the implementers. And so it's really appropriate that we allocate about the same amount of time to the academics, the foundation, how you go about doing, and then how it really was done. And I hope at the end of this you walk away with the sense that finance, this area field, which has certainly not been in the brightest light for the last 5 years in the public, can have an important impact, favorable impact, on societies, not just here but around the world, and on you and I. And that you can understand it's a direction of a field to go into where you can, if you're fortunate, you can have a real impact, again, a positive one. So with that, let's get started. Now, let me say something about where the retirement problem comes from. Of course, we've always had to provide for retirement 200 years ago, 200 years from now, whether you're in Japan, whether you're in Brazil or the United States, you have to provide for that because it's a fundamental part of our life cycle. How that is done is varied all over. The usual metaphor for funding retirement is the notion of a three-legged stool. Actually, that's in the United States. In Europe and the UK, they have a more highfalutin thing. They call it the three pillars. But we'll stick with the three-legged stool. And as you all know, a three-legged stool is stable, so the metaphor you hope is a good one for retirement. And those three legs are government component, employer, and personal saving. And those three are the vehicles. The institutions that do it can include government institutions, private sector, or family. Just as an aside, in many societies even today that are agrarian, the principal retirement system is the family and passing the farm on, okay? So there are very many ways of doing this. Around the world, for the most part, certainly in developed countries, the principal employer-type plans, at least for large companies or for governments, were what we call defined benefit plans. And I'm not going to teach you all about that, but the common sense is you go to work first day, and they say if you stay with us until you're 65, 67, whatever the number, and we look at the number of years you work, we multiply that a formula, you're going to get a certain amount of money for the rest of your life, and that's your retirement. Just similar to the idea of Social Security in terms of what you're promised, hence defined benefit. You know what you're going to get. That's the system that has had a huge shock. If you've been reading about it, you would certainly know. But let me just remind, this goes back to the beginning of the, really 2000 to 2002. A series of events occurred where world stock markets fell and world interest rates fell. As a consequence, it absolutely shattered the many companies with large defined benefit plans. It was a double whammy. As a consequence, the private sector started to say, we're no longer going to take those risks. We're in the auto business, not in the pension business. We're in the steel business, we're not in the pension business, but we're taking more risk in our pension plan than we are in our business. And as a consequence, they started to move out, and by default, went to what we call DC plans. All DC plans, many of you, the faculty, have 401, 403Bs and so forth, TIA, CREF. What's defined is some percentage of your salary goes in from your employer and yourself, and that's what's defined. What you get at the end depends on how those monies are invested and what happens between now and your retirement. So defined benefit, defined contribution, okay? The shock is DB was there. By the way, no employees that I know of were marching on their employers and say, we want to get rid of our DB plan. They like it. The problem was that it was far more expensive than employers understood and far more risky. So that's no longer viable, not at the same price anyway. So this is what creates the shock, that creates the challenge this time. And what I want to first point out is every time there's a challenge, you should also think there's an opportunity. Because when you have a challenge, you can respond and try to find a way to address it, and that creates opportunity to innovate, to change things and make things matter. So that's basically the background. And this process has been going on now for some number of years, and it's likely to continue. And as I say, this is not a US-centric process. It's happening around the world. It's happening in the UK. It's even happening on the continent in various places in Asia. We're an aging society, but before we feel too sorry for ourselves, you know, it's the old, you know, the two comedians, I had a dirt floor, well, at least you had a roof, okay? Everything's relative. If you look at China, it's aging even faster than the US. And with one child per family policy, that's a cliff edge. Korea is aging faster than China, okay, and so on. So the point is, this is a big problem, big challenge, and now how much it goes about solving that. Now, I've worked on this area of life cycle for many, many decades. However, commercially, I've always done a lot of commercial things, but this one, I waited until there's something very important, need. When there's not need, you can't innovate because nobody cares. You can't get people to buy $5 bills for $3 when they don't feel a need. This created the need. We went in to do this. When we decided to attack this problem, we said, okay, we know it has to have a defined contribution structure. Why? Legally, because the plan sponsors have said they will not take the risk and the expense. So it's no good to come up with a solution, but before you start out, isn't feasible. You have to put in real-world constraints. So that was a constraint. The question is, given that constraint, can you come up with the best design, not for the plan sponsor, you took care of them, you got rid of what their one issue was. What's the best design for the people, for the participants? And so we went all the way back to square zero and said, what would people want? And that introduces us to what I want to take you through. What I'm going to take you through is the process. Now, this may seem strange to you, but, I mean, or obvious to you, but in practice, in finance, unfortunately, financial services often don't follow it. The first step before optimization or coming up with solutions is to define what is it you're trying to do. What is the goal? Now, the people we're talking about here are designing this for are working middle-class people. You're not going to be able to communicate very much with them, so you can't say the answer is give them each person a well-trained, honest financial advisor. Not feasible. So you have other constraints, but we'll get to that. But the goal is to have people have a good retirement. What do you mean by a good retirement? If you had to guess, and I'm looking out at the audience, you're a young group, and so
Thank you.
retirement, yes, David, I meant, and my I say, you're a young group, so retirement for you is an abstract concept. But if you were to ask me what you're likely to want when you get there, I'm going to tell you that by the time you get to retirement, you've gotten pretty used to how you're living. Whatever way you're living, you've gotten used to it. And everyone would like to live better. But I can promise you, you're not going to want to live worse if you can avoid it. So what we took as the goal, a good retirement is if you can sustain the standard of living that you've come to enjoy in the latter part of your work life throughout retirement. Now, that doesn't fit everybody, but I think it's pretty close. If you look at the slides, the theoretical foundation for this notion is the life cycle hypothesis of Modigliani, for which he received half of his Nobel Prize for developing and so forth. But that is the goal. So if you don't like the goal, wrong lecture, you know. But pretend, you know, that you do if you don't. And then the next step is, okay, that's a nice description, but how do you convert that something to a financial defined thing? Because we're going to do financial things, investing and so forth, to do this. And here we had to say, well, how do you define or think of a standard of living in financial terms? And the question is that a certain amount of money, like if I have $1 million, or $2 million, or whatever, okay? And my response would be, I don't think so. If you think about how we think of standard living, it's really a flow of income. So you say, if I were earning $50,000 a year, what lifestyle could I afford? You don't say, if I have this amount of money, all right? Or if you think of Social Security, when you get your benefits, or your grandparents or parents get your benefits, they don't say you have a pot of money. What do they say? You're going to get a stream of income. Defined benefit plan, same thing. I point out with some trepidation here, I like to use, Jane Austen, I talking last night, a young student, she had read Pride and Prejudice. Maybe you saw the movie. But if you remember what Jane Austen's mother was all about, her job in English life in the 19th century was to go around and find proper men for the women that she cared about. And so she would evaluate them. And when she evaluated, let's say, Mr. Darcy, it turned out, I gather, got pretty high marks. She didn't say he was worth 200,000 pounds. What did she say? He's worth 10,000 a year, an annuity, a statement. All I'm trying to get across to you is common sense, that when you define standard of living, we tend to do that in terms of income. I'm not going into the technical parts, but the reason I'm emphasizing this, if you're managing to a goal of a stream of income versus a certain amount of money, like $1 million, the investment strategies are different. The right optimal strategies are different. And that's what I want to ask. If you get the wrong goal, you're very unlikely to get to the right place. So that's the important pieces. So that's the goal, a stream of income, and it has to be protected for inflation because if it's a standard of living. So that's our goal. Now, how do we do that? So we got our goal. What's the next step in the process? Any engineering process, before you get into the detail, you write down what are the critical criteria that must always be satisfied by any candidate solution. And if you look at the third slide, third slide, you'll see there's a list of 6. You don't have to read them all, we're talking to you, but just so we're keeping you in your place, all right? And the first one says, to do this, we have to have low-cost, highly efficient investments which are scalable, because we're designing this for millions of people. If it doesn't work, if it works for 10 people, fine, but that's not going to solve the problem. So it has to be scalable, low cost, and it has to get every ounce of efficiency we can think of out of the assets that people have. Working class and middle class people are not poor, but they don't have a lot of extra. Maybe no one has extra, but surely they don't. And so the responsibility to a good design is to get them, hope 100% of efficiency is as close to it for what you're offering them, okay? So that's the first one. The second one is, how do you define risk? Because remember, this is a goal. There's no promise you'll get there. Nobody's saying you'll get there for sure. This is where we're trying to get. So you have to say, how do we manage and manage risk? And we measure risk by how much you miss by, the shortfall of that goal. Okay? Now, how do we know what the goal is? Just quickly, we set the levels at a replacement ratio. That much, if you're living on your salary, what fraction of your salary you would still have to get in order to sustain the way you're living? You don't need 100% because one of the things you did with your salary when you were working was save for retirement. You don't have to do that anymore. And then you have other stuff. People spend lifetimes of work estimating that kind of thing. So let's say, just if you want a number in mind, 75%, which means if you're earning, I want to make the math simple, so if you're earning $100,000 and you're living on it, then let's say $75,000 will allow you to sustain. So you understand, that's how we get to that number. All right? So that's coming back to, the question is, how do we manage the risk that you don't make it to where you would like to be? And that's very important, and it's different from the way it's done now. The next one, and I'm going to just look at my cheat sheet here, because I always will forget them. I'll do them in the wrong order, okay? But if you look there, the next one is that you must, in the solution, must integrate all sources of retirement funding. Not all sources of wealth the person has, but all sources of their retirement. Why is that important? Those of you who have studied portfolio theory know that if you optimize a subset of the portfolio in general, that doesn't optimize the portfolio. You have to look at the whole thing. Those who haven't studied it, the common sense is that if you have other assets and we're trying to get you to a goal, we ought to take that into account when we're thinking about what we do with the assets that we control for you or we manage for you. to treat the abstract problem as if the only asset there is the money I'm managing for you, that's your whole thing, is far too abstract for reality. It leads to very poor optimization. So it has to integrate it all. It turns out this is terribly important, particularly for working class or people whose income levels are at the lower end. Again, I'm not talking about poor people or other things, that's a different set of issues. I'm just saying at the lower end. Because if you don't take account of the other sources of retirement, in particular Social Security and so forth, you get a very wrong picture of what you should be doing in managing their money. And the focus is on hitting the goal. That's all we care about. We're not trying to get salvation for people. We're not trying to get them a boat. We're just trying to get them a good retirement. All right, so integration is very important, as we'll see. The fourth one, and I can't say this enough, if anyone ever talks to you about a solution to retirement, you know, you're listening to a political speech or you're listening to a pitch, and the answer that they have for their plan to solve things in a DC context, you understand where you are ultimately responsible for the decisions what's done with the money. You know, your contributions go into a pot, and either you hire someone or you're responsible for what's done with the money. That if that carries in it as a linchpin of the plan, that the way we're going to do this is we're either going to get people to engage and manage their accounts, and we're going to train them to do so. I will make a fairly bold statement that that's not a solution. That's not feasible. First of all, behaviorally, people don't behave that way, okay? Namely, they tend to put things off, they don't do things, we all do that. Secondly, you may surprise people who are in finance, most people don't like doing personal finance. So even if they knew how to do it, it's not something they want to do. And you know, when something you don't want to do, you don't do it, or you do it under duress, okay? And then the question is whether you really can train people. We don't do that in medicine. We don't say, you better study surgery and understand how to do, you know, make a decision of whether you should have a titanium or some other metal clip put in you. You shouldn't expect people, massives, to do it in finance. So any solution that works. So the design criterion said, this has to be effective, not just work, even if the first time the participant engages is the day they retire, meaning no engagement, no information. They won't even give you a name, rank, and serial number. If you want information, you got to get it from there. Okay? So that's the very, very important one. But if we can get people engaged, and those of you who have ever heard any retirement pitches or investment pitches, the mantra is get people engaged. And I say that's almost right. Get them engaged, provided that engagement improves their chances of succeeding in achieving their goal. I can get people engaged, you know, with a video game, interesting movie, or telling them how they can trade futures after they come home from work, you know, video game for real with real money. I don't think any of those, even though you're very engaged, are going to improve your chances for retirement. So engagement should only be in the course of making things better, which means meaningful choices and meaningful information, and don't clutter people with things. There's a difference between important and meaningful. And if I could switch to automobiles, I know at least some of you have those, right, or bought them, okay? I can tell you as a one-time auto engineer that the compression ratio in your engine is pretty important to how the car works in terms of gas mileage, speed, and so forth. So you go to a dealer, and the dealer gives you the pitch, and you come to me and you say, I went to that dealer, what do you have? And I say, oh, he's a good guy or gal, but his engine has a 9-to-1 compression ratio. My engine has a 9.3-to-1 compression ratio. Now, you're smart enough to know that it must be a higher compression ratio. Good, or I wouldn't be pointing it out to you. Is there anyone here in the hall who can tell me what increasing the compression ratio of an engine by 0.3, from 9 to 9.3, does in terms of improving how much gas mileage, how much faster 0 to 60 speed, or how much more reliability? I would doubt it. If there is one, then the exception proves the rule. I see silence. So that's an example of something that's very important to how the car works for things that do matter. But talking to you about that is meaningless because you can't convert it into anything that's useful or meaningful to you. What you're interested in that case is how much mileage and so forth. The parallel in retirement is talking to you about what asset allocation you want, how much you want to invest in mid-cap European stocks, do you want a little Thai real estate, should I be using a zoop-de-zip or zip-de-zoo, okay, and here's a bunch of risk-return frontiers for you. Those are all important to managing a portfolio and doing the right thing. So they're important information. They are meaningless. Nobody knows how to convert that into what matters to them, and they get frustrated or worse. So you understand that that's what I meant by meaningful and choice. And so the solution, when you see it, is really simple for the user because it only focuses on that. Now, I've taken you through the criteria. The last one is that it has to satisfy what the sponsors are willing to do. That's very important, otherwise you don't have a plan. I'm spending the time on the design criterion because if you get the goals right and you get the key design criterion right, then you have a roadmap to how to do it technologically. And I could take you through some of them, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to point out a few examples. One such example, just to show you how important that considering the entire set of assets, not just the ones you're managing are, is if you turn over the next page, you'll see we include as assets now, in addition to Social Security, any defined benefits people have. That applies typically to workers in their 40s or 50s, okay? Those are previous plans. The money that's being physically managed in the DC plan, and then one very important one, which is your future contributions plan. Remember, you're going to contribute, and your employer, each of you 4% or whatever the number is, to retirement. Particularly when you're young, almost all of your retirement assets are in that box. You've acquired almost no DC, you probably don't have a DB, and your Social Security rights aren't much yet, okay? So all of it is in future contributions. People know that, but they rarely put that into as an asset. And why it turns out that's important is not only to the magnitude of the asset, but more importantly, to the risk of the asset. So I'll illustrate what I mean by that. See the column? We've got 4 things in the column. Imagine 2 hypothetical people, each with the same total retirement wealth. I'm adding it up, right? That column. So they both have the same amount of wealth. And let's say, not whether it's a good idea or not, in August 2008, their entire amount of money put in their DC plan was in the stock market, 100%. Okay? Does anybody know what happened after that? September of 2008? By March of 2009, depending whether you were, how lucky or unlucky you were, but on the whole, it was down 35, 40%. Pretty bad, right? Great. Now let me tell you the rest of the story. The first person, remember they have the same amount of total retirement wealth. The first person had 90% of that wealth in their future contributions and 10% in the DC plan. So of their total retirement assets, how much did they lose? 40% of 10%. They lost 4%. Not good, but not a disaster. The second one had 90% of their assets in the DC plan and 10% in future contributions. How much did they lose? They lost 40% of 90%, 36%, more than a third of all their retirement assets. That's a disaster. Do you see same asset allocation? You could do this with any. You get very different welfare effects on the people. I'm just trying to get across here, these are not hypotheticals. If you don't take account of, these are order 1 errors. And I'm pointing out order 1 errors that are missing from, I think, virtually all, but certainly most of the systems that are offered today. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. We'll be here, and I won't bore you. But what I wanted to take you through is to get a feeling, first how it's designed and how it's done. Now, to show you, I'll jump ahead. I wanted to show you some pictures of what a user, well, let me talk about one more, sorry. I forgot this one. Turn to slide number 6. It has a probability distribution. Looks like, I can say that here, right? Okay, even if you don't like probability, think of this as the chances. And if you've ever gotten anything from any investment people, they always show you things that look like this, okay? So what I've done there to try to make a point about about the design of a system, and it wouldn't have to be just the one we ended up designing, but I'm just telling you the features. A typical retirement account in a DC, they put you in stocks and bonds, they put you in a target date fund, they have some mix, whatever they are. And what they typically show you or give you in one way or another is a distribution of how much money you'll have, or in our case, how much income you'll have when you retire. And since they don't know for sure, they're taking risk with it, there's a distribution. And I've drawn that distribution generically as a kind of, looks like a bell-shaped curve. Do you see it there? I'm sorry, I don't have slides to point to it, okay? Now, it doesn't have to be bell-shaped, it could be this shape, lock shape. It basically looks like that. So we have a goal that we're after, right? Our job is to get you to 75%, or let's be concrete, to $75,000 income, a certain amount of wealth, right? That's what we're trying to get you to. If we get you there, you're at nirvana. We've achieved the goal for you. That's it. That's not it for your life. We've solved one of your problems. You now have the right amount of money to ensure yourself that you can have the retirement you want. Do you understand? So 75, that's what we say here by the desired. You see where it says desired there? There's a desired amount. That's our goal. Now, if you look at the bell-shaped curve, what does it do? And if you said, what is the chances under the bell-shaped curve that we'll get to the goal? Those who know, you would look at the shaded area under the curve to the left, from your point of view, to the left, okay, of the curve from 75,000, and let's say that's 0.71, then the answer you get back is you have a 71% chance of making your goal or more. Why or more? You see the curve goes to the right, keeps going? So you can get even more than 71,000. Do you agree? You see the picture? How many people here would not like to have or more? Anyone who doesn't, see me after the lecture, I can take care of your problem. We all would like or more, provided what? It costs us nothing. But as I'm here to point out, this is costing you. It's costing the participant. Why? Because in terms of achieving the goal, getting more than the goal doesn't add to our goal. We're trying to maximize the chances of success, which means getting you to a good retirement. To the extent that assets are being used to try to get you more than that, in effect, in terms of the goal, they're being wasted. In terms of the goal, if we got you 80, you'd be happy. It doesn't improve on the getting to the goal, does it? So do you see that what you're getting there is you're giving up something that's valuable to get something that doesn't improve your chances of getting to the goal. So what do? If our focus is to get you to the goal with the highest best chance, we're going to give up that part, the or more. We're going to say, give up the or more. Why? By giving up the or more, we can use those assets to improve your chance to get to 75. I'm not going through the math with you. Do you see that? If something's valuable, in fact, that or more, anyone who doesn't think the or more isn't valuable, for those who want to know, it's actually equal to the value of a long-dated call option on your portfolio with a strike price equal to 75,000. And believe me, a long-dated call on a high equity portfolio with a long horizon is a pretty valuable piece of stuff. So I wouldn't want to cheat you. I won't try to take it from you for nothing or revert what I have in my pocket. So that is real value. So common sense says, I've in a sense wasted part of my assets on that part because it's not helping me get to the goal. It's nice, but it doesn't help me to get to the goal. And we can agree what the goal is. You can make the goal 150,000 if it's feasible. My only point is we're trying to get you there. So we take that value and we use it to increase your chances. The other thing I didn't mention too, we have the goal, the target, 75, but what about the risk? If I just say I'm going to maximize your chance of getting to 75 and don't talk about risk, you can bet I'm going to put you in a pretty risky position because you're saying, I don't care how much I lose, I just want the best chance of getting there. So what we do is put a second level in. Think of it as the essential income, minimum income. It's some level, while not guaranteed, extremely likely to be achieved. And it's vested in things like U.S. government tips and things like that that are very, very safe. Okay? It's a more complex strategy, but that's... So you have two levels. 75 is what you're trying to get to. And then maybe we have 45 is virtually certain. So we're trying to get you to 75, subject to it that you at least are going to get 45. Now you can move that up and down too. All right? So if we set that minimum, then if we do that, we cut off the left tail. So if you look at the picture, what you see is generic looks like this. What we have is truncated on the left, and it's truncated on the right, and it goes like this. Now, you can make the left very far down. You can say, hey, I don't care. If I get $25,000 a year, that's good enough for me. I want to improve my chance. I'll take more risk. That's fine. By the way, this is how we convey risk to people. And we find most people can understand that if your minimum income is reduced from 45 to 40 or to 35, you're taking more risk. You don't have to show them standard deviations or explain that. People seem to understand that if I'm shooting for 75 with a minimum of 45, that if I'm shooting for 75 with a minimum of 35, I'm taking more risk. And that's all we want to convey to people. They do the right thing. They get the right message. Nothing here is technical. All right, so that said, what's the message from showing you this distribution? We do these through dynamic strategies. What we will show you is no magic, not some secret sauce that I know, or with all respect, David knows, or dimensional, how to get, beat the market, how to always, be the permanent Warren Buffett. If you build that into your system, I would say that's also very risky. Remember, it's supposed to be scalable. There are no hedge funds. There are no private equity funds that are scalable. Ultimately, they cap out. So your solutions have to be ones that are scalable. And secondly, if you have a Warren Buffett, if you really have one, sadly, people eventually retire. And if we're looking at a 20, 30, 40-year horizon, it's pretty cheeky, as the Brits would say, to say I can get returns like Warren Buffett for the next 40 years. So we leave that out, not that we won't accept it, of the struggle of how to get people there. So that's really the essence of what we're saying. By focus on the goal, first establish the goal, focus on the goal, and then we can laser focus on achieving it, we can outperform others, generics, who are not optimizing to the goal without being any faster, smarter, or quicker. If we have a little faster, smarter, quicker, that's always good. 500 horsepower is better to have under hood than 450. But we don't depend on having 500. What I'm trying to show you is design matters, and that this is in the line with the design criteria. And I could go on and on about this, but I hope, when you hear this, that you get a sense of it. Finally, how close am I on time? Perfect timing. No, okay. 5 minutes, okay. With professors, and I'm known as a talker among professors, if you don't put a limit on them. Okay, so here we are. If you'll look, let me show you what it looks like, a generic version of what it looks like when people finally get engaged. Notice, by the way, this is designed, I forgot to mention, if you have a pension system that people are automatically enrolled into, then the sponsor and we say, what would this person likely need as a target in order to sustain their goal? Let's say it's 75. What do you think is an appropriate level of minimum for people with this profile? You said it. And the contribution rates are set as defaults. The retirement age is set as defaults. So if the person never communicates with you, their system gets run and optimized to those goals. You say, well, I'm not giving choice. Yes, we are, if you want it. The truth is, most people, when they come, especially young people, they don't know what should I want in retirement? It's an abstract concept, as I started with. So most of the time, they ask you anyway. But you have to have a default. We will optimize to that default setting until the day the person retires. In truth, eventually they get engaged. One way they get engaged is if things turn out not to be going too well and their chances of success are bad, they get an alert. And the alert says, politely, your chances of getting to a good retirement are not looking good. That's the bad news. But there's something you can do about it. And if you come here and get engaged, we'll tell you. And this is very much akin to a doctor's checkup. You know, you go and get your report, they send you an alert. Mr. Merton, you've got 300 cholesterol. That's not good. But what else does it say? But Mr. Merton, there are things you can do about it. You can diet, change your diet. You can exercise. You can take Lipitor or some other statin. And those three things will solve your problem. So it doesn't just say, hey, you're not doing well. It says you're not doing well, but there's something you can do about it. Now, this is voluntary, what people do. This is what DC plans are. So like your doctor, if Mr. Merton doesn't pay any attention to that, and I get 300 of these, one a month for the next 25 years, and that doesn't work out for me, you're going to say, well, he couldn't compel him, he did the job. Same thing here. If you've been telling people for 25 years they're not going to make it, and they don't, I think that's called expectations management and meeting your responsibility. Most people will respond as they would to a medical alert, because this is important. If they do and they become engaged, then if you go to slide 8, what they basically see, they see everything they're legally supposed to see, but this is the one slide. And what it shows on them is the desired target. It shows them the essential target, the lower bound, okay? It shows them how much is being saved now, how much is being contributed, and what the retirement is. That's all. And then you see the speedometer. Speedometer tells you how you're doing. Just like when you're in a car with a speedometer, you look at your speedometer or your gas gauge, whatever you like. And if it's going up, you're doing better. If it's going down, it's looking worse. We find that people react to this in the right way, even if they have no idea what probability is. What we're plotting there is the chances of success. They don't have to understand. All they have to understand what speedometer means better. They can relate to school scores. You know, if you got a 50 on your test, probably not too good. If you're at 85 or 90, not bad, maybe quite good. You see the point. That's all they see. That's their feedback. Let's say the thing they got says, this said 80. How about 50? That's bad, right? That's like the cholesterol. What can you do about it? There are only 3 things you can do to improve your chances of the goal. Save more, work longer, or take more risk. There's not a 4th one. Sorry. Being lucky, yes, but I don't know how to do that. So there are only 3, so it's actually simple. What they find is if they increase the slider for saving, the speedometer goes up. They get immediate feedback that if they were willing to save a little bit more a month, they'll improve their chances. Then they say, not this month. They put it down. Then they say, well, what if I was willing to work instead of 65 to 66 or something? They move that up. They'll be quite surprised how much that helps them, working even 1 or 2 more years. But then they say, carrying those bricks for another year, forget it. What else can I do? Lower your essential. That's taking more risk. And if none of those work, then maybe you better adjust your goal from whatever it was down to a level that, because you're saying, I'm unwilling to save more, I'm unwilling to work longer, and I'm unwilling to take more risk, then you're either going to stay at 50% or maybe you should adjust your goals. Those are all meaningful decisions, because if they move that slider up and push the button always twice, the first one we all know, when you order something, they say, do you really mean it? Push it again. But if you do, this is not an advice system. This is an integrated solution. This is a solution. When they push it twice, their next paycheck is small. And if they never come back again for 5 years, everything will be optimized according to all of that. And that's how the process continues. So that's the whole story of what's there. This is how you get people engaged. There's a lot behind this in science. It looks easy. The technology that's needed, all market-proven technology. You don't experiment with pension systems. All the technology you use to make it really simple for users and effective, you need everything you can from finance to use it. You cannot do this with just a simple, I'm going to put it 60-40 in bonds and set it and forget it. There's a lot going on, but that's our responsibility with the oversight of the sponsor, the plan sponsor who hires professionals, consultants, and so to monitor you. Those are the people who can tell whether you're doing the job you're supposed to do. To give people prospectuses telling them or send them data and say, we're doing well, how the heck are people going to know? They're not. So it's meaningless to send them that. They get it. You're free to get it. It's like the handbook of your car. You look and it'll tell you what kind of tires you have, how many cubic inches. Nobody ever looks at that anyway. But this is the solution. You see, it's a solution. If you go into this, you're done as far as that's concerned. Doesn't mean you'll reach your goal, but you're done. You're not getting a piece. You're not being able to assemble parts. It's a solution. And it's a solution that we will continue to innovate with. Doing this, as I say, requires an enormous amount of finance and finance tools and everything else. It's like the ballerina when she's up on the stage. What is her job? To make everything she does be effortless. If you get up close to her, she's perspiring, her toes are black and blue, all to make it look effortless to us. Well, you can think of this solution we propose is along that line. We've tried to make it really easy and user-friendly and get people engaged because they can understand this. This is something you don't even have to have a high school education, like learning to drive a car. Once you move those dials for a while, you get a sense of the feedback. And I can promise you, if people actually adopted this and adjusted along the way when they got behind, their chances of actually getting success are higher than we're putting in here. And this doesn't solve everything, but it's at least a solution dealing with reality in terms of meeting what you can do, dealing with human factors, behavioral finance, behavioral economics, psychology, sociology, as well as, analytics and markets. So with that, I will say thank you very much. I hope you see the role of this in terms of how finance as a science, the things you've learned, and can come to bear on a very big problem. And now I just want to say this is not just in some mad professor, like I stuck my finger in a socket, my hair went straight up, in some professor's lab. This actually exists in the real world. And so people say, how can you possibly create custom plans? Every one of these, each individual one of you has your own goal, and it's managed to your goals as things change for you. As your personal conditions change, we get all that information without asking you. How do we get it? We get it from the record keepers. We get it from your employer, all legally, and as market conditions change. So it's dynamic optimization, customized to every single individual, working class, middle class. No, hey, you're all 34 years old, therefore you all do the same thing. Man, woman, child, whatever, wherever you live. And that's the spirit of it. So thank you very much for listening. I'd like to then turn it over to David to tell you what it's like to run a business where you make all these dreams and designs actually happen on a massive global scale. Thank you.
No, that's very interesting, as usual. I guess I should start off by saying, please don't call us up, because this isn't something we sell to individuals. We don't have an 800 number. I think we're the largest money management firm that doesn't have a toll-free number. But this is something we work through plan sponsors and employers. It's impossible to set up just on a one-off kind of deal. I guess I should start by saying one of my favorite definitions of an economist is somebody that won't take yes for an answer. Anyway, my job today is kind of give you a little background of how I got here. Our firm really is geared to implement these great new ideas. And How it kind of came about for me was I grew up here down on Naismith Drive, Lawrence High, Chesty Lyon, you know, KU, and business school. And on the University of Chicago, the idea is going to get my PhD and come back and teach. And somewhere along the way, I decided I didn't want to teach. And nothing wrong with teaching. But I'm in the wrong place, you know. I can't teach and I can't play basketball. I'm in trouble here. Anyway, so the idea is I'm more interested in applying these ideas because great ideas sitting on a shelf really they don't do anybody any good. So what I found was when I got to business school, this is 69, 71 I was there. The field of finance had undergone a revolution. Really from the mid-50s to the mid-70s, there was kind of a revolution in thinking. And sure, there's been a lot of innovation since then. But it's really applying the ideas that were germinating in that 20-year period. The biggest idea, of course, in the 21st century, probably the biggest idea in finance since the development of stock and bond markets was the option pricing model that Bob got his Nobel Prize for. But there were a series of innovations, and it's pretty clear if you look at the way people manage money and do their financial planning was quite different than what you would learn, at a leading business school like Kansas. So I kind of wandered around the financial services desert for about 10 years, and we finally started Dimensional in 1981. It was pretty Spartan beginning. We started, our first office was my apartment, and our first trading room was my spare bedroom. But we've been able to grow over time. And basically, what we try to do is apply innovative ideas. We don't go out and try to do a survey of what people are willing to buy and fill that need necessarily. We've always come more from the academic side of things. We've come up with good ideas and then try to figure out how to apply them and be innovative on the execution side. And this creates a great environment because we don't have to think up the great thoughts. We get connected with people like Bob to think up the great thoughts, and we implement them well. And from Bob's side, he can trust that if he comes in and works with us on applying his ideas, we'll do a great job and do it the right way. So it's been, for me, a great experience. It's been a lot of fun. It's great to be able to build a business, feel good about it, and at the end, of it all, look back and think you might have helped a little bit. Our future is ideas like this. I think there'll be any number of ideas that can germinate off of this basic idea. I know it's all reasonably complicated, but I think this is the future. There's the basic idea is that there really aren't any free lunches out there, and if you look at the way financial services are distributed, they're very expensive, and in order to have people have a reasonable chance of having a good financial experience throughout their life cycle, you're going to have some of these innovative ideas be part of the solution. And so I think that's all pretty cool. I feel really blessed. And with that, why don't we ask some questions? Okay, what was it like getting a Nobel Prize?
Is that a real question?
Yes. Does somebody else want to ask that? Yeah, Neely did.
Neely did, well. All right, it's very nice.
How did that happen?
Well, it was the prize. Everybody knows the day the prize is going to be announced. This story is also proof that I wasn't expecting it. As you know, because it comes from Stockholm, which is 6 hours ahead of the East Coast. If you get a phone call, it's going to come very early in the morning. And on the day when I knew it was the prize, at that time, my business part of my life was headquarters were in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I was going to get the first shuttle from Boston, where I live in Cambridge, to New York to go up to Greenwich, and a 6 o'clock shuttle. So I'm all ready to go, and I'm headed for the door, you know, to get the plane. And the phone rings. And the phone, like a baby's cry, you know, gets your attention, even if it's not important. And so I, realizing that, said, well, you know, if I stop to do this, I'll miss my plane. If it's important, they'll leave a message. Oh, hell, I'll just, excuse my friend, I'll pick it up, right? I picked it up and I said, yes, preparing to say, I got to catch a plane, call me later or I'll call you back. And there was this deep baritone voice that said at the other end, he asked my name, and I said, yes, and he says, well, my name is Ben Samuelson. I am the Director General of the Nobel Foundation, and I have some interesting news for you. And it indeed was. I never got to my plane, by the way. You know, the place filled up like a backed up tank or something with reporters and all. It was very exciting. And then I think it was relatively easier for me than some of the others from some of the other fields because I've been somewhat more used to being out in public. But for many people who have spent their lives you know, inside labs, it's a big shock because suddenly they're on the world scene. I did stop because I've never been shy about saying things that I believed in, and you know, if you have tenure, right, that's part of the protection. But I realized if I said something really dumb, it was going to be over everywhere and reflect not on me, but everybody else. But other than that, that was pretty exciting. And then, without extending it, if anyone wants to ask about that, I could talk to them at some point. But then when you go to Stockholm, where David was actually came through.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance somebody asked you to come watch them at get their Nobel Prize, I would recommend going.
Yeah, no, for Sweden, first of all, at that time of the year, that time of the year, the sun comes up at 11 in the morning, goes down at 3 in the afternoon. So there's not a lot to be doing in that far north. And so this is their Super Bowl. It always is the same date, December 10th, Nobel's death date. And so the whole country, you know, it's on satellites, the whole country turns into this thing. And, you know, everybody's interested in all kinds of stuff. And you go to the Grand Hotel and you live a kind of a story life, and you have a driver and a big limo at your service, and you have a little button that shows the Nobel medal, and you have a member of the Foreign Service, a senior member goes around with you, is kind of making sure everything works. And then you have the ceremony, always takes place in Symphony Hall. It's all white tie and tails, and for the ladies, gowns, no exceptions. Little kids, they got to get them. And it's, you know, it's right out of there. They're real kings and queens with real tiaras, and you know, it's kind of a fun, exciting occasion. And it goes on for about a week, and so that's about it. And as I said before, it was great to be thought that your work is considered for it. Winning it, you have to understand there are many more people whose work is good enough who won't win it because they only give one a year for the whole world. And there are a lot more than one a year for the whole world, and you have to be alive to get it. So the other dictum is if you want to get it, stay healthy.
Okay, we have some microphones here too. Are you-
Was there anything that inspired you to come up with the idea of yours? Oh. Was there anything that inspired you to come up with this idea that helped people plan for the future?
Well, let me answer this because I'm not sure, maybe you mean by inspire, but I think this does answer. First, if you meant by this, there's something that motivated me. The answer is what motivated me to do it at the time I did was the situation in the world. I saw a major shock hit, which told me, and probably everybody else, I don't mean I'm a great forecaster, that the current system that was in place was not going to be sustainable. And it wasn't going to stop being sustainable pretty quickly. So although I worked on this problem for years, life cycle problems, that's what motivated me to do it when I started in 2004 to build this. In terms of inspiration, You mean, why is it a good thing to do? And partly because that's something I worked on, but the other is that, it's a big challenge, but it's something I know how to do. I have, I think, a comparative advantage, I don't say absolute advantage in doing, which was a big problem that affects millions of people. Who wouldn't want, if you have an idea on that, to take a shot? I mean, finance, it's global, it's intellectually challenging problems, they're very complex problems. They'll compete with anything you'll find in physics, chemistry, in terms of complexity and difficulties to work on, especially because you're dealing with human beings and not things that do what you're always supposed to, okay? And also, if you do something like this, if we succeed, which I intend that we will, although it's obviously risky, if we succeed, we know there will be millions of people for years who will be better off as a consequence of this. They won't know it was us, but we will know. What do you need? Oh, by the way, if you're successful, it's risky, you'll also make a good deal of money. So, I mean, why not?
All right, Jill had one over here.
How are you in this model going to account for what I consider the biggest sticker shock, which is going to be the rate of inflation changing, because all these models are beginning just now to change. They're using 2.5, they're going to change to 3, and 25 years ago I was using 4%. And now the base of my client, not the base, a lot of my clients are living well into their 90s. So I'm wondering about modeling. First of all, I commend you for doing this, because the problem is not with the individuals I work. The problem is with folks who are in the 401ks that I am seriously worried about, and I appreciate that you've done this. So you get my question.
Okay, did everybody hear the question?
No.
No. Okay, the question is the following. A great concern, particularly longer term for retirement, for people who do not have the benefit of a financial advisor, the very group we're talking about, is how do we address the issue of inflation uncertainty? At one time she used 4%, some people are using 2.5%. We all understand that cumulatively that can be a big, big problem. I'm glad you asked that. Now, we didn't talk about this, did we? Oh, no, so she's not a shill in the audience that I put out there to ask this. But that's precisely, I have other slides which I left out because time, and also they were a little more complicated or specialized. But what we do is, we can't forecast inflation, but we can hedge the risk of inflation. So from the very beginning, not when you're 5 years from retirement or 10, but when you start, let's say, at 25 years old, you finish and you go to work. If you're in this plan, from the beginning, we measure risk in terms of the goal, which is income for life protected against inflation. So we, in the asset base that we trade in, we treat the risk-free asset not as a treasury bill that preserves value. We use, it's customized to every individual depending whether they're retiring. But you can think of it as, we use something that is going to be as close as possible to what a real-life annuity would be starting if you're 25, 40 years from now. And we hedge the inflation risk and the real interest rate risks by trading in that. We don't forecast it and say, all right, I assume 4%, end of story. That's a forecast, but it doesn't deal with the risk, which is what you're talking about. Because we trade to that, we don't have to forecast. If we could, fine, it would be great, but we don't need to. What we do is say, you have a risk if we put you in something that's not that. The safe asset for someone who's going to, let's say, retire in 20 years, the safe asset to buy today is a very long-dated fixed income asset that pays nothing for 20 years and then pays a stream of inflation-protected income for the rest of your life, let's say 30 years. Okay? That's a long-dated bond. If we buy that, we've locked it in no matter what happens to inflation. We don't say everything's put in that the same way in normal investing you don't put everything in treasury bills. But the benchmark of safe is that, and if you want safety, that's what we put you in. And finally, because you asked the question, remember that goal? Remember we cut off the right edge? If we got you to your goal 5 years before you retire, we take all risk off the table. Because if you're at your goal, there's only one way things can go for you: down. So in August of 2008, if you were planning to retire in March of 2009 or something, the chances are, not because we have a fixed rule, but because we're trying to get you to goal, if you're at or near your goal, you're almost going to be 100% in that asset. You're not going to be holding 30%, 40% equities. That's one of the advantages, okay? So I'm glad you asked that, because this exemplifies the difference of really creating a solution to solve that problem, and not saying we can forecast better, but rather we can actually hedge the risk because the marketplace provides that. The technology to do that on a massive scale at low cost is not easy, but it's very doable, and it's market-proven technologies. Basically mix these inflation-protected U.S. things in a mixture that recreates that particular fixed income instrument. So we are hedging you against, protecting you against the risk, not trying to forecast it. Okay?
I think we have time for one last question. Go ahead.
Two really brief questions. One for David. In your implementation of this idea, what does the fee structure look like? Because as you said, there's no free lunch, and something I'd be interested in hearing. And for Robert, one of your bullet points that you didn't mention addresses long-term care. How does long-term care insurance factor into this program?
Okay, talk about the cost. It's really important, if you're going to have a strategy like this, that the fees be reasonable. It's really important, we think, that if you take all the fees, direct, indirect, sometimes you can't even measure all of them, but if you could take every piece of cost in the system, it would need to come in under 100 basis points, including all management, money management, the delivery of the service. And, particularly if you're a big employer, we can do quite a bit lower than that. It ought to be on the order of about 75 basis points. And, that's, at those kind of fees, you have a decent shot.
Yeah, remember, this is a solution, not just a set of funds that you then have to have someone manage for. You got that from slide 10, I think, further enhancements. Just as with software or anything else, if you let the engineers control releases, you never would sell anything, because by the time you're about to do version 1.3, the engineers have come up with much better improvements. So if you keep on improving and never sell anything, that's not good business. And you also learn from getting the product out there. So we have a much grander plan. In fact, we even have a grander plan. David has a thing called life, but we can get to that later if we can. But the basic idea is we have a grand plan. But you have to first make the thing work and show it really works, because this is good. So we aren't doing the long-term care now. But some of the features, for example, the largest single asset that a U.S. American household has at retirement, even now, is their house, if they have a house. It's bigger than their pension plan in value, typically. And what's important, but we aren't doing yet, but we know how to do it, and it will get done, is how to use that asset to the most benefit for the retiree. And there are ways to do that, because the house is a very interesting, complex asset, even though it looks simple. Because for the retiree, if it's the house you want to live in, then you want to stay and own it, right? Because that's your stream of income. It's just like an annuity. If you own the house, then you don't have to worry about the cost of housing. I mean, taxes, of course, but not that, okay? On the other hand, for all of us, our houses, certainly our properties, are going to outlast us. We hope we go to a better place where we don't need such things, but the house will still be there. And even in countries like China, where the tradition is that people used to move into the house, as of course is always true in agrarian economies, in an industrialized economy, which all these are going for, and certainly the US, it's actually quite rare that the children move into the house that the parents leave. So at the point where they no longer need the house, it's just a financial asset. And therefore, since it's a big asset, and you want to manage the use of that asset to get the financial part available to go to where it's needed, including helping people have a better retirement. At the same time, preserving their role as a stream of income. And I take you through it because that's a big one. We don't have it yet. We know how to do it. We will surely do it. And we'll do the same thing with medical and long-term care and all as it evolves. So we will always be innovating. But at the moment, we're trying to get this one right. And I think if you compare what this does as a solution versus what's out there commercially, I think it's fair to say this is pretty far ahead of the game. They better make this work right first. But thank you for the question.
A couple of housekeeping notes, and then we will thank our guests here today. One, we wanted to save some trees. So we printed those slides on pretty small type. So if you would like a larger sized slides mailed to you, emailed to you, we can arrange that. So Kelly, should they leave an email with you or outside? Okay. I'm sorry? With Bonnie. Okay, we have somebody waiting at the door. So if you'd like the email, the slides emailed to you, please sign up and we'll make sure you get it. Secondly, the journalism students today, I want to thank them. University, a great university, is this potential for collaboration. Bob and David, we didn't tell you, but because of space limitations, this has been live streamed, and the journalism students helped us set that up. That's right. A lot more people are watching you than in here. The third thing I want to say to all of my students is I hope today you saw something I talk about a great deal, the nobility of business. Too many places we think that if you're in business, you're surely walking around with horns up there that you're hiding under your hair, right? That's not true. Here are two people, we've had long conversations, who've said, let us see what we can do to help millions of people who will never know who Bob Merton is or who David Booth is. How can we make sure we preserve their retirement so that their quality of life after retirement is as close to what it was before as possible? So I want you to remember that. You can and you must, and I hope you will, do well by doing good. And lastly, students, when you win that Nobel Prize, you're supposed to go back and remember a dean and invite them to go with you. So that's my hope. And now, Bob, first I want to begin with you. To thank someone like you, we figured we needed our celebrity. So ladies and gentlemen, give it up. We have here Baby J coming in.
Oh.
Baby J, I won't get in your way, but this is a signed basketball from Coach Self
Oh,
for
wow.
Bob Merton. Please.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
Please, let's show what we have there.
Wow.
All right. How do you like that?
Oh, that's for me. It's got my name on it. I thought that, two. This is great. Thank you very much.
Bob, we expect you to be hanging it up next to that Nobel medal, okay?
Absolutely.
We have Merton
For sure.
number 1.
Yes.
Well,
Well, thank you very much. This is a great treat. Very special.
Now, David poses a particular problem. How can we thank him for bringing back the rules of basketball where they belong? Can we thank him for that? So this is my favorite print. I've looked around. These are the first 4 original buildings of the University of Kansas. And so when my 4 professors retired, I told them that they were the 4 pillars of the School of Business. And so this is a very special print to me. we give it to people that we think of as that key, that important to the University of Kansas. So David,
Oh, thank
I
you.
would like you, we're going to mail it to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bob, thank you so much.
Oh,
I
your
would like
problem.
a picture with Baby David, the two of you.
Okay,
Just the two of you and
Okay.
Baby Day.
okay,
All
okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us. And I know that David and Bob will be here for a few more minutes. So if you would want to join us informally, talk to them for a few minutes. But once again, on behalf of the School of Business, all of our faculty and staff, I would like to extend my sincere thank you to you. Keep an eye out. We keep this coming. We have more and more exciting speakers coming through the business school. Thank you for your support. And how do we end? Rock chalk. Thank you.